Hey there, I'm Project Shadow 99, and a couple weeks ago I had the fortune of seeing the Broadway revival of the 1970s musical Annie.
Loosely based on a comic strip by Harold Gray that began in the 1920s and lasted for several years, the Broadway musical Annie, written by Thomas Meehan, originally opened in 1977 and ran for nearly 6 years, setting a record for its theater at the time. It won a bunch of Tonys, including Best Musical, and spawned a ton of productions and national tours. In fact, it was once estimated by the New York Times that Annie is produced 700 to 900 times a year in the US alone. So yeah, it's pretty popular, and they even attempted to make play sequels for it off Broadway. The first one was a piece of garbage. The second one was a little better, but chances are this is the first time you've heard of it. There was also a TV sequel about Annie and Warbucks going to England so Warbucks can be knighted by the Queen, and about this evil woman's plan to blow up Buckingham Palace and somehow become the Queen.
Oh, and Ian McDermott's in it, so I can do this! Okay, lame sequels aside, how did the revival hold up? Pretty well, actually.
I enjoyed myself a lot while watching this production, and aside from the kid characters' accents being a bit too thick sometimes to the point of being distracting, I didn't find any real flaws in the redone version.
At least, no flaws that weren't in the original, anyway. Anyway, like a lot of plays on Broadway, Hollywood eventually said, hey, we can profit from this too. And thus, the 1982 movie version of Annie was born.
One of the last films directed by John Huston, known for such film classics as The African Queen and Maltese Falcon, and filmed at a college in New Jersey, this was the first attempt to turn Annie into a movie. It was certainly very different from the play in a lot of respects, and how did it do? Well, it didn't really turn much of a profit, though it was one of the top 10 grossing films that year, and reviews were generally about 50-50s. For instance, the Razzie board members seemed to really dislike this film and nominated it for a bunch of categories, but the film itself is a huge cult classic, and a lot of children of the 70s and 80s have it near memorized, to the point where a lot of them don't know that Annie was originally a play to begin with. It's also got an all-star cast with Carol Burnett, Albert Finney, Tim Curry, Bernadette Peters, and so on.
Now, I was going to do a review of this film, but I couldn't initially find any footage of the film's ending. Which was a blessing in disguise, because this film's end. Okay, not yet.
I've since found footage of most of the ending, but then discovered that in 1999, The Wonderful World of Disney, the guys that brought us this, decided to bring us their own direct-to-TV movie version of Annie. Directed by Rob Marshall for films such as Chicago and this guilty pleasure, this version of Annie stayed a lot more true to the original musical. It did change quite a few things itself, though, but then, it's Disney. They do that. And this film had some noteworthy stars too, like Alan Cumming, Kristen Chenoweth, even Oscar-winning Kathy Bates. Now, I was going to review this instead because I had footage of the entire movie, but it didn't seem like enough to go on. So I decided, hey, I like the play so much, why don't I compare these two films and see which one's better? I could compare the play too, but since the play's so superior to the films in my opinion, it would mostly be pointless.
So let's not waste any more time. This is old versus new, or more modern as opposed to new, since they actually are making another movie with Jamie Foxx supposedly as Warbucks, who isn't called War. This is old versus new Annie. It's the hard knock life for us. It's the hard knock life for us. Stand treated, we get treated. Stand kisses, we get hit. No one cares for you, a snitch, when you're in an orphanage. It's the hard knock life. It's the hard knock life. It's the hard knock life. Let's start off with our lead. This is the best leading Annie.
These two Annies are pretty different. The original is played by Eileen Quinn. She seems like a pretty cheerful person for someone who's lived her whole life in an orphanage. Not to mention she's supposedly pretty strong, since she only has to threaten Pepper to calm her down despite Pepper being a head taller than her.
Blow it out your old wazoo.
And also manages to fend off a group of boys all by herself. Notice how she beats this one up with some awfully fake looking punches and all the rest run off.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to admit to being beaten up by a short 10-year-old with a red afro either.
She even manages to temporarily get away from 3 criminals, one of whom is an ex-convict, and even climbs up hundreds of feet into a ridiculously stupid climb.
Okay, sorry. The time isn't right yet. The time isn't right.
Quinn's Annie also has a tendency to speak her mind a bit too much, saying things that are socially awkward and sometimes just insulting without even realizing it. Which I guess works since, again, she's lived in a rundown orphanage for her whole life and has no idea how the real world seems to work sometimes. In the newer version, Annie's played by Alicia Morton, and looking at her, you wouldn't know right away that she's Annie. Though that's mostly because this is the only Annie that doesn't have that ridiculous red hair.
Yeah, I know it's iconic, but that red mane on Annie can look pretty ridiculous in some versions. Like the 82 one.
In addition to an auburn bowl cut, Morton is somewhat less optimistic than Quinn, which seems more proper given what she's had to go through her whole life. She still waits for her parents and defiantly claims she's not an orphan, though when she finds out about her parents' death at the end, she tearfully claims that she subconsciously always suspected so. Don't get me wrong, she's still cheerful throughout the movie, but she mixes in reality of her situation as well. When she first finds out that Warbucks supposedly can't help her parents, she gets sad, then happy when he offers to adopt her, then gets downright miserable when her parents actually do arrive, preventing the adoption, then gets happy again when she does get adopted. It doesn't make her a crisscrossing, non-committal, selfish kid. It makes her a kid. Kids do have easily swayed emotions, and they do change their minds or views more quickly and spontaneously than adults sometimes. Quinn mixes it in too, but not to the degree of Morton. I didn't really believe that 10 years of misery in an orphanage could result in such a positive girl. Plus, Quinn's acting can get a little, how shall I say it, cheesy. It's not really bad, but she gets quite a bit of corny dialogue to say awkwardly.
Lincoln Lizard! Lincoln Lizard.
And don't get me wrong, I know that particular phrase originated from the play, and it's used in the other film too. But there it's only used once, and Morton says it in passing more naturally.
Lincoln Lizards! Just look at this joint!
Now, Quinn's performance was very hit and miss with the critics for some of these reasons. In fact, she got both a Young Artist Award and a Razzie for the performance. Finally, there's the singing. And I'm sorry, but I think Morton's a better singer than Quinn. I just think she can hit the notes much higher and more consistently.
I know I'm gonna like it here. I know I'm gonna like it here.
At the end of a lot of her singing lines, Quinn seemed to get a lot lower and quieter.
Dumb dog, why are you following me?
Quinn, you were good, but I think Morton was better.
Point goes to the new.
And I'm gonna rearrange your teeth.
Won't you please come get your baby? Maybe.
But what about the supporting characters, all the other little pig droppings? This is Best Supporting Cast.
Now, in the 82 version, there's a few more characters. For instance, Punjab and the Asp, who were never in the play and were actually from the original comic. Some might see Punjab in particular as being a bit stereotypical. If an Indian stereotype is levitation and calming dogs down, then I need to get out more. Besides, they do get to save Warbucks at one point without him even realizing it at first. That's pretty cool. And Punjab does save Annie later during the ridiculous...
Dang it, man! Wait for it!
What about Bert Healy? He's even more cheesy than Annie is in the original, but given that he's a stereotypical 30s radio host, that's forgivable. In the newer version, you don't even see him. His scene's just heard for a little bit by the orphans. The same thing nearly happens to FDR, who had his whole scene in the play version and in the 82 movie, but he only gets a plot exposition cameo at the end of the newer version. How about Sandy? Well, in both versions, he's seen much more than he is in the play, but he's largely useless. But I guess I'd have to go with the older one because he does make himself relevant to the plot a few times. Like when he stops the Bolshevik from escaping and when he leads the orphans to the Warbucks mansion. Speaking of the orphans, how about them? Well, in the play and the newer version, there's only 6 other orphans other than Annie. But there's plenty more in the 82 version. Not that any of them really do much of anything apart from taking part in the musical numbers. And among those 6, none of them really have any specific characters except 2 of them. And no, the girl who keeps saying, "oh my goodness," does not count as her having a personality.
Oh my goodness, oh my goodness!
Among those two orphans, how about Molly? Again, I gotta go with the original, mostly because she seems to enjoy herself more and tries to defend herself, despite being like 5.
They never miss.
And then there's... Pepper, and I have to go with the original here because she's just got so much presence. If you've run into a character who's given little to nothing to do, but still leaves an impression, then you know what I'm talking about. I think a lot of that has to do with her actress, Roseanne Sorrentino, who had done a bit of stage work before this. In fact, she played Annie on a national tour, and she seems to command a lot of attention as Pepper. She treats all the other orphans, especially Molly, like crap, but still stands by them. In fact, she's the one who helps them escape the orphanage at the end. I think it's not that she hates all the others, but just feels they're beneath her. Though she'll still help them because she hates Miss Hannigan just as much as they do.
Kissy, kissy, kissy.
Kill! Kill!
In the newer version, Pepper doesn't do much of anything apart from complain a little. Now granted, Pepper in the original didn't actually do much physically outside of threatening, and she did get conked in the hip with a mop by a 5-year-old. But hey, Boba Fett just fell into a pit in the original trilogy and everyone still loved him, right?
Anyone that says extended universe gets fed to the Rancor.
What about Grace? Well, the original played by Anne Reiking just seems more interesting and dedicated to helping Annie. Though I will concede the newer one played by Audra McDonald is a far better singer than her.
Cecile will pick out all your clothes.
Cecile will pick out all your clothes.
Your bath is drawn by Mrs. Greer.
Your bath is drawn by Mrs. Greer.
Annette comes in to make your bed.
Annette comes in to make your bed.
Though Reinking being more of a dancer and McDonald being a Tony-nominated Broadway star might have something to do with that. In fact, Anne Reiking actually did a bunch of the choreography for Annie. And finally, we come to the millionaire himself, Oliver Warbucks.
Oh no, Oliver Warbucks, the billionaire.
Whatever. And again, sorry to be so predictable, but the old one is clearly the stronger performer. Albert Finney plays Warbucks as such an over-the-top businessman, hanging the Mona Lisa in his bathroom.
There's something interesting in that woman's smile. I might learn to like her. Hang her in my bathroom.
Attacking photographers.
What the devil's going on here?
And having very little social skills that don't involve shouting.
I want a boy.
This guy is just hilarious. I think my favorite scene of him is when he does the radio interview, while reading stage directions with that over-the-top playing it straight voice, and he doesn't even realize he's doing an advertisement at first.
Contact Oliver Warbucks.
Warbucks interrupts. And thank you, all new Iodent, the toothpaste with Miracle K64 to fight Hallie
Tulsus.
for letting me talk to you this evening. Good night, Bert Healy. And good night for the Red Network, Drop Page. Did I just do a commercial?
In the remake, he's played by Victor Garber, and he's just plain boring. I'm sorry, but he does nothing for me at all. He's also not much of a singer, which is exemplified when all of his songs are done with Morton or McDonald, who are both significantly better than him.
What is it about you? You're big. You're loud. You're tough.
Now granted, Finney's not too great a singer either.
It'll be fine. Nothing to fear. She'll be as happy as she was here.
But he doesn't sing that much, and he gets by in his overall performance and presence, of which Garber doesn't have nearly as much. So yeah, I think I've beaten around the obvious bush here long enough. The original did have better, more interesting, and stronger supporting characters.
Point goes to the old.
Well, that's about it. Goodbye.
They'll be there calling me baby.
And now we come to what's usually my favorite topic in movies, the villains.